Let me get to gold. Gold, $5,100 an ounce. Okay. Why is this happening? Well, the first thing that you need to understand is gold is a barometer. Gold is a barometer of belief. And what happened last week? What was the consensus that came out of the World Economic Forum for the entire world to see? I want you to think of this like a guy who has billions of dollars that you could invest. Because to stay safe, to stay ahead of the game, you have to think like that and then act in your own world. And if I have time today, otherwise I'll do it tomorrow, I'm going to show you how you interpret this and how you can act at all levels, okay? But you have to think like a billionaire. And the billionaires are moving money. Okay? Why are they moving money? What happened last week? What happened last week was at the WEF. The WEF openly came out and said the old system doesn't work. And it's failing. So it was a consensus around the world that what the West has built no longer is any good and it won't work. Got to find a way out. That's what all smart money, all central banks, the entire world that's paying attention, that is the message that they heard last week at the WEF. Okay? Now let me layer on a couple of other things that you probably don't know. We are headed towards a tripwire, and it's a race to the finish line. So let me give you the first tripwire, and that is Japan. Japan is, imagine an old man on a treadmill, okay? This old Japanese man on a treadmill. It was supposed to be temporary, him on this treadmill, but it turned into a life support machine. And now he's got to keep running. If he's not running, everything dies, okay? For 40 years, Japan has been like that little guy on the treadmill, told, you got to keep moving. You can't stop. Just stay. Because if you stop, it means recession. So what's wrong with recession? Here's the part that nobody's ever really told you, Americans don't realize. If he stops, it's bad. If he speeds up, it's bad. And not bad for Japan, but us. Here's why. Japan's government has piled up so much debt that even normal interest costs become dangerous. That's why Japan has spent decades now making money too easy at home, okay? 0%. At some point, they were in negative interest rates, okay? Please take the money. We'll pay you to take the money. Interest rates, if borrowing ever gets expensive, the bill will swallow the budget in Japan and here. And the world has gotten used to a place where Japan was the place to go borrow cheap money. Now, here's where the story becomes our problem. Japan is not just a country. Japan is a country we've kept alive for a couple of reasons. One of them is they are a gigantic buyer of American IOUs. You'll hear them talked about as bonds, okay? But they're IOUs. We're like, hey, we want to build this train to nowhere. We're only going to build a mile's worth of track, and we're going to be $4 billion over budget, but we're telling you up front, it's not going anywhere. We need the $4 billion, okay? And Japan, because they needed us, Japan would go, we'll buy that. We'll buy that. They now hold about $1.2 trillion in treasuries. They're the largest foreign holder. It's not China, thank God. It's Japan. And that matters because their purchasing helps keep our borrowing costs from rising even faster. But the treadmill is starting to wobble. In late 2025 into this month, 2026, Japan's long bond yields have surged. Japan's 40-year government bond yield moved above 4% since the first time that the bonds existed. What does that mean? That means if you borrowed money from Japan, you are now, or if you want to borrow money from Japan, it now is going to cost you 4%. It used to be 0. This means the market doesn't want to play pretend anymore with Japan. Okay, they're not satisfied with that. And when Japan's yields rise, the temptation begins. I can get 4% in Japan if I buy a bond. Why would I lend to America when I can lend to Japan for more? So the money that used to flow outward can come home. Now let me explain Tripwire without all the Wall Street language. For years, people borrowed in yen because it was cheap. So what did they do? Because it was 0% interest or negative percent interest, you would go over and you'd say, I want to borrow $1 billion. And people would borrow $1 billion, 1 billion yen. And they would buy it and they'd get it. Sometimes they were making money on borrowing it, but at least it was 0. And they would trade those yen into US dollars, and then they would buy things that paid more. So the stock market or a US bond or whatever. Okay, this is called the yen carry trade. Here's what you need to know about it. It doesn't work, okay? It's so unbelievably immoral, it's just frightening. So what they were doing was they're buying a bunch of cheap yen printed over in Japan. They would then take that yen, which they sometimes, again, were making money on borrowing. Think of Goldman Sachs going over, a big bank going over and saying, I want 1 billion yen. And we're gonna take that 1 billion yen. We're gonna get out of that, $500 million, and we're gonna take that $500 million and we're gonna invest it in Wall Street. We're making money from Japan because they're giving us 1% on borrowing that. They're giving us an additional 1% every year for holding those yen and taking that loan out from them. And then we go to Wall Street, we can make 6 or 8 or 10%. So we're making 11%. This is great. We win. Unless things change. If the yen suddenly swings the other way, if it strengthens, the borrowers panic, okay? And they rush to undo the trade. Why? Because that money's not free. And when you rush to undo it, you sell the things you bought with dollars and you get back into the yen. That pushes U.S. markets around. That pushes U.S. interest rates up. That turns a problem over there into a problem over here. So Japan is trapped. And the trap has a wire running across the Pacific tied to the exact same global system America sits inside. So that's the first reason why gold is screaming. It's saying, wait, what's happening with Japan? Japan can't move. And Japan's going to have to move. But they can't move. Now, there's another side of this. From Japan, go across the sea, and you go to China. China is much, much worse. Okay? Much, much worse. And nobody's willing to talk about this. And this leads to what's happening on the ground in Minnesota. Okay. I want you to, for a minute, when we talk about China, I just want you to imagine a city made of mirrors. And from a distance, it looks like a giant skyline. But the closer and closer you get to it, you see this is just reflections stacked on reflections. None of this is real. That's China's debt story. And if you think our debt is bad, you ain't heard nothing yet. China, built a modern miracle. We saw all of these things they were building. We're like, look at what China is doing. But it was built at speed and the speed of desperation. And the foundation of all of it is just borrowing and crazy borrowing. The simplest hard fact that can explain China is China's total borrowing, government plus households plus companies, has gotten enormous relative to the size of its economy. One estimate, we only can work on estimates because you can't trust what China says. One estimate, reputable, says China's overall debt to GDP is around 290% by the end of 2024. And what is secret and nobody talks about is the local government hidden debt, okay? Also, the data shows China's credit to the private non-financial sector about 200% of GDP. Okay, but that's not the real story. The numbers are not the story. It's the structure. Listen how crazy China has done this, okay? China has two big pressure chambers. One, property as the national savings account. For years, apartments weren't just homes. They were the main store of wealth. So the system kept building and building and building and telling people, buy these apartments and we'll take the money, but you can't have the apartment until you totally pay for it. And, you know, you'll pay for it in 25 years, then you'll get the apartment. The apartment's already built, okay? But nobody's living in them because everybody's buying them and you don't get it until you pay it off, right? The local governments were the ones doing all of this. They were borrowing money through side doors. Okay, so China's got its own debt. Then China pressured the local governments because they needed money for these projects and growth targets. So they just went and created these, quote, special vehicles off to the side that's not as visible as the normal government debt. The IMF just said their off-the-side debt is about 46% of their GDP. And that's the end of 2023. So when property sales fall, local governments are losing a key revenue source. What do they do when they lose that? So they lose this key revenue source, and their ability to pay for things weakens. And safe investment products start to look, less safe. So China is so close to the edge because not only is their federal government way overloaded, but their consumers have bought all this stuff that may have been sold 2 or 3 times and they don't actually own it. And the money to pay for all of the building of these ghost cities is on the locals. And just the local debt is 46% of GDP. Okay? Margin of error here is so thin. And the moment, just like anything else, remember, gold is a barometer. And what is it a barometer of? Trust. The moment that public belief, the moment ordinary people in China believe the guarantees are not guarantees, the danger isn't math. The danger is a rush for the exits on everybody. See the video. It's free yet this week on glennbeck.com for the torch. See the educational video I did, Capital Controls. I'm telling you these things now because no one else will. Everybody was asking me last week, what does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? I'll tell you what it means. It's much more complicated than, just like, well, things are getting crazy. This is, things are getting crazy and people who have money know it. China's leaders, they have tools, they have controls, they have state banks, they have directed rescues. Those can slow down the crash, but they've already done most of those. But they also confirm the problem. You don't need emergency tools unless something is breaking. And when the world senses that China's growth engine is no longer a growth engine, when it becomes a debt engine, what are we going to do without China? United States, we're the only ones growing. Do you understand that? When Donald Trump said we're the only ones, that's what he meant by that. Everybody in that room understood China is on the verge, but the United States is on the verge because of Japan. So where do you go? Well, you go to the thing that is older than promises, and that is gold or silver. And that's what's happening to gold. That's what's happening to gold. But I'm not done yet. Let me give you some good news. Gold rises not because people are greedy, but because people, they get sober. They sober up. So what's happening with gold is people are sobering up, all right? This is the sound of people buying fire insurance in a neighborhood where everybody smells smoke and everybody's house is on fire. And so they're buying fire insurance, okay? The world's drowning in debt, not just America. The global debt, by the way, is $251 trillion. That means the entire system is just going to melt down. And so you can't cut rates without consequences. You can't stimulate because of currency weaknesses. So who's buying it? First of all, the central banks are buying it by the ton, and people who know are buying it because they know something really bad is around the corner. But we're the safest house in the burning neighborhood. Remember, every house is on fire. But we're not the worst house. We're still the safest house. Not because we're perfect, not because we got it down, but because everybody else, including China, Europe is worse. China, Europe, Japan, everybody has these deep vulnerabilities. And we're sitting here worried about the guy on the treadmill in Japan. Everybody else, they're worried about the fire that is burning their whole house down.
Thank you for thinking for yourself and being part of a movement, because that's really what all of this is. If you want the full story, you want to go deeper, go to blazetv.com/Glenn. Go there right now, sign up, no interruptions, just the truth, uncensored and unfiltered. Don't just watch, take a stand. And I'll see you over there in a minute.